At some point, whether in moments of grief, silence, or starlit wonder, we all ask it, what happens when we die? It's a question older than civilization, whispered by shamans, carved into tombs, sung in funeral chants. And though science offers silence and religion offers doctrine, something deeper still stirs within us. Not fear, but curiosity. What if death isn't an end, but a threshold? What if behind the closing of the eyes is an opening? In this journey, we won't settle for easy answers or shallow comfort. We'll walk through the ideas that have haunted and inspired humanity for millennia. Plato's eternal soul, the Eastern wheel of rebirth. The Christian promise of resurrection, the modern tales of near-death encounters, and the metaphysical paradox of selfhood, memory, and eternity. This isn't a sermon, it's a meditation on what death might reveal about life and what the mystery of the afterlife might say about the mystery of you. So breathe deeply. We are about to walk into the unknown, not with fear, but with wonder. It begins with stillness, not the stillness of a quiet room or the hush before dawn, but the profound stillness that arrives when something ends. When breath slows, when eyes soften and no longer see. When the world recedes like the tide and we feel something unnameable. Death, the one event every living being will face. The one certainty we carry silently beneath our days. And yet we know almost nothing about it. We avoid the subject in polite conversation, we bury it in rituals and euphemisms. He passed, she is gone, we lost him. But the truth is simpler and more mysterious. At a certain moment, the body no longer functions. And everything we've ever known, the thoughts, the memories, the I, slips into an invisible horizon. And here is where the question begins, does anything remain? Is consciousness extinguished like a candle in the wind? Or does it continue, transformed, reborn, expanded? Many believe that death is a final stop, but others, across cultures, religions, philosophies, have insisted that it is only a threshold, a passage, a doorway into something else. What if they're right? What if death is not the end of you, but the beginning of a deeper you? What if the moment your heart stops is not the end of your story, but the turning of the page? In this video, we will journey beyond the veil, not with dogma but with wonder, not to prove but to explore. We'll follow the whispers of ancient traditions, the echoes of metaphysical thinkers, and the mysterious patterns behind near-death experiences, through Plato's eternal soul, through reincarnation in Eastern philosophy, through modern accounts of light, tunnels, and peace. We'll ask, what lies on the other side? Not to answer with certainty, but to look with open eyes. Because perhaps death is not the opposite of life, but its secret continuation. The unfolding of a deeper mystery. Let us begin. There's a moment, quiet, imperceptible to those around us. A breath, exhaled, and then nothing. Or perhaps everything, what actually happens in the instant of death. Not biologically, not in terms of heart rate or neural activity, but experientially, what does it feel like to slip past the veil? Some say it is darkness, others say it is light. In many traditions, death is not seen as a stop but as a passage, a crossing into something else, a transition, not a termination. Imagine standing at the edge of a vast ocean. You can feel the mist on your face. You know there's something beyond that horizon. You just can't see it, not yet. To the living, death looks like disappearance. But to the one dying, might it feel like emergence, like waking from a dream? In ancient Egypt, the soul journeyed through the Duat, the underworld, where it faced trials weighed against the feather of Mat. In Tibetan Buddhism, the Bardo speaks of 49 days of transition where the consciousness experiences visions, projections of its own mind before rebirth or liberation. In Christianity, the soul departs to meet its maker, a divine reckoning, a homecoming. Different metaphors, different symbols. But one message echoes through nearly every culture. Death is a movement, a journey, a return. But where do we return to? To some divine origin? To the source, as mystics say, or do we dissolve like a drop into the ocean of being, losing the illusion of the separate self? The 13th century Persian poet Rumi writes, "Don't grieve, anything you lose comes round in another form. You were born with wings, why prefer to crawl through life?" He invites us not to fear death, but to see it as expansion, not an end, but an unfolding. What if death is not falling asleep, but finally waking up? What if the confusion and noise of life are the dream? And in death, the soul returns to clarity. There's a strange peace in this idea. Not because it answers all questions, but because it opens a door. Not a solution, but a space, a sacred hush in which we can wonder. We begin to understand something profound. That death, far from being the enemy of life, might be its frame. The thing that gives life depth, shape, urgency, without the limit, there is no beauty. Without the silence, no music. Without death, could we truly grasp what it means to live? So, when the time comes, for you, for me, for someone we love, perhaps the question is not why must we die, but rather, what waits when the veil lifts? What do we become when we are no longer someone? The next chapters will walk deeper into that question through ancient philosophy, personal testimony, mystical insight, and modern science. For now, we pause and let the mystery breathe. What if death is not a full stop, but a comma? What if your story continues, not in heaven nor in a void, but here again? This is the vision of reincarnation, the idea that we live, die, and return, many times in many forms. It's one of the most ancient beliefs humanity has ever held. From the forests of India to the mountains of Tibet, from Greek philosophers to modern mystics, the idea has echoed across time, that the soul survives death and seeks its way back into the world, the river that never ends. In Hinduism, this cycle is called samsara, the wheel of birth, death, and rebirth. It is not a reward. It is not a punishment. It is a process. Just as rivers flow back to the ocean and clouds return as rain, the soul too is caught in a rhythm shaped by karma, carried by memory, drawn by unfinished longing. You do not choose your next life as a tourist picks a destination. You are pulled by who you are. And who you are is shaped by everything you've ever done, thought, feared, loved. In this view, the self is not a fixed thing. It is a current, a stream of consciousness that continues flowing even when one vessel sinks. The dreamer in many skins, but what carries over from one life to the next? Not your name, not your face, not your memories, at least not consciously. What survives is deeper. Your tendencies, your wounds, your essence. If you lived with cruelty, perhaps you will face cruelty. If you lived with compassion, you carry that seed forward. But unlike judgment-based views of the afterlife, reincarnation doesn't offer finality. There is no eternal reward. No eternal punishment, only the unfolding. The chance to grow, to repair. To learn, again and again, not because God demands it, but because your soul isn't finished. The self that wakes up. In Buddhism, reincarnation is not just about who you become next, it's about waking up now. Because the cycle of rebirth is fueled by attachment to identity, to desire, to illusion, and so long as you cling, you return. Each lifetime becomes a mirror, showing you what you haven't let go of yet. Freedom comes not from a better rebirth, but from no longer needing to be reborn. This is nirvana, not annihilation, but release. The extinguishing of the flame that constantly reignites itself. Memory across lifetimes, but is there proof? In modern times, stories have emerged. Children who recall lives they've never lived, languages they never learned, people they've never met. Some researchers, like Ian Stevenson and Jim Tucker, have cataloged hundreds of these cases, many eerily detailed. Skeptics call them coincidence or cultural influence. Others wonder if even one is true. What does that mean? Is the self more porous than we thought? Are we all vessels for something older? The ethical mirror, reincarnation, carries a quiet accountability. You don't just die and leave consequences behind. You meet them again, perhaps in unfamiliar forms, and this reshapes how you live now. Would you harm if you believed you might become the one harmed? Would you hate if you knew your next face might carry the echo of that hate? Suddenly, life becomes less about judgment and more about responsibility. We are not punished for our actions, we are shaped by them. Rebirth as mercy, but reincarnation is not a trap. It is also grace. It means no soul is ever lost forever. No mistake is final, no life is wasted. You will have another chance and another. Until the soul is ready, not to escape the world, but to see it clearly. To love it deeply without needing it to be different. To finally stop the wheel, not out of despair, but understanding. Between lives, some traditions say there is a space between lives. A place of rest, a field of light, a realm of choosing. Where you reflect, where you review. Where you prepare to return, is it real? No one can say. But even if metaphorical, it speaks to something deep, that our lives are not random. They are woven, each one a thread in a vast, unfinished tapestry. And you are part of something larger than you know. The one behind the many. In the end, reincarnation is not just about what comes next. It's about realizing you have been here before. Not as this self, in this form, but as someone, and maybe, just maybe, you will be here again? So the question is not, will I live again, but rather, how do I live now, knowing that I might, and beyond that? Who is the one that lives through all of them? What is the soul, if it is not just memory? Perhaps it is the silent witness behind all identities, never born, never dying, only dreaming, until it wakes. There's a reason the idea of reincarnation refuses to die. Across millennia and continents, humans have returned again and again to the notion that the soul does not end with one lifetime, but instead journeys forward, returns, evolves. This chapter is not about belief, but about the strange persistence of a dream. In the quiet forests of India, ancient sages closed their eyes and listened. What they heard was not silence, but cycles, birth, death, rebirth, over and over. In their vision, existence itself was not a line, but a wheel. Samsara, the endless turning of the soul through lifetimes, shaped by karma, seeking release. To the Hindu, the soul is Atman, eternal, indestructible, but veiled, bound by action. Every choice echoes, not just now, but into the future of who you will become. A king reborn as a beggar, a soldier reborn as a monk. A cycle of becoming, dissolving, becoming again, but this is not just India's story. In the serene stillness of Tibetan mountains, Buddhist monks chant to guide the dead through Bardo, the in-between state. They believe consciousness, unanchored from body, wanders through visions and illusions before being pulled again into form. Life after life, they say, is not reward or punishment, but confusion, habit, craving. To be reborn is to remain entangled, to awaken is to become free. And in the West, the idea lingers in unexpected corners. From the secret teachings of the Gnostics to Pythagoras and Plato, who spoke of the soul's forgetting and its slow remembering. Even today, stories surface, children recalling lives they never lived, faces they never met. Are they fiction, fantasy? Or fragile threads of memory from another life? A whisper across the veil. More than a doctrine, reincarnation is a poetic response to death's finality. It offers a second chance, a continuation. A belief that nothing, no joy, no pain, no lesson is ever truly wasted. And perhaps within that idea there is something healing. That we are always beginning again, that nothing is lost. That death is not an ending, but an unfolding. There is a moment unmarked by clocks that whispers just after the body fails, a gentle dissolving, a slipping of skin from spirit. For those who have come close, through near-death experiences or mystical glimpses, it is not darkness that greets them, but passage, not an end, but a threshold. Across centuries and civilizations, this moment has been described with uncanny similarity: a tunnel, a corridor of light, a sense of motion without movement. And at its core, peace, an overwhelming peace that dissolves fear and silences all noise. Is this the soul? Is this the you that persists? For Plato, the soul is the truest part of us, eternal, unchanging, imprisoned in the body like light behind glass. Death, then, is not a tragedy, but a release, a homecoming. Eastern traditions speak of the soul's journey not as an escape, but as a cycle, reincarnation, karma, continuation. In Tibetan Buddhism, the bardo, the liminal space between death and rebirth, is both mirror and maze. One's attachments shape what comes next, liberation or return. Modern accounts, those who've crossed death's line and returned, describe encounters with light, with figures, with a kind of love that has no boundary. Are these dreams of a dying brain, or are they glimpses of something truer than waking life? The veil is thin, and thinner still in these moments. Perhaps what we call death is simply the eye closing on one world and opening in another. Not a disappearance, but a deepening, not silence. But a change in music, and so the soul journeys on, not away, but inward. Through the veil, into whatever comes next. Imagine standing at the shoreline of a vast ocean, your feet buried in sand still warm from the day's sun. The tide pulls gently back, revealing shells, driftwood, and strange patterns in the earth. Then, without warning, it rushes forward again, as if drawn by a memory. This is how many traditions describe the soul's journey, not linear, not final, but cyclical. Where one life ends, another begins. This idea of reincarnation has been whispered through the myths of many cultures, from the verdant hills of India to the echoing caves of ancient Greece. It suggests that death is not a wall, but a doorway, that we do not vanish, but return. Again and again, but why? What are we returning for? In Buddhist and Hindu cosmology, the cycle of rebirth is known as samsara, a wheel that turns ceaselessly. It is not always a comfort. To be caught in samsara means to suffer, to cling, to repeat the same patterns of craving, fear, and illusion. Death is not the release, it is a pivot point. A momentary pause before the cycle resumes. And yet, this cycle is not hopeless. At the heart of these traditions lies a quiet promise that awareness can break the wheel. That by understanding our attachments, by seeing the world clearly, we can step off the merry-go-round of suffering and awaken to something higher, moksha or nirvana. Not annihilation, but transcendence. In this view, death is not the enemy. It is a mirror, a teacher, and each life is a classroom. But what about the space between lives? Some mystics, seers, and those who've had near-death experiences speak of a strange in-between realm. Not heaven, not hell, something quieter. A place where the soul reviews the life it just lived, not as a punishment, but as a learning, a kind of cosmic debrief. In Tibetan Buddhism, this is known as the bardo, a transitional state that can last up to 49 days. Here, the soul experiences visions shaped by its karma, its memories, and its level of awareness. If the soul recognizes the illusions, it can attain liberation. If not, it is gently guided back into a new womb, a new identity, a new beginning. The bardo is neither cruel nor kind, it simply reflects. In many near-death experience NDE accounts, people report passing through tunnels of light, meeting beings of profound love, and reviewing their life in an overwhelming wave of empathy. In those moments, every hurt, every kindness, every word is felt from the other's point of view. It is not judgment, it is understanding. And then, quite often, they are sent back. Karmic currents. Why do we return if we are reborn? It is not random. The law of karma is not vengeance, it is coherence. It says that every action plants a seed. Every thought, every gesture, every choice, they all ripple outward. And in future lives, those ripples return not as punishment but as opportunity. If in one life you sow cruelty, the next life may be a chance to understand pain from the other side. If in one life you abandon someone, the next may bring you abandonment, not as wrath but as growth. This view is not fatalistic. You are not trapped by your past. You are shaped by it and free to choose anew. Each rebirth is not a sentence, it is an invitation. The many masks of the soul. So, what is the soul, then? If we return again and again in different bodies, what remains the same? Who are you beneath all the names you've worn? Some say the soul is like an actor moving through roles, soldier, mother, orphan, king, but never fully defined by any of them. Others say the soul is a flame passed from candle to candle. The outer shapes may change, but the light remains one. In Hindu thought, the deepest self, the Atman, is not individual at all. It is Brahman, the universal soul. The illusion is that we are separate. The truth is that we are drops returning to the ocean again and again until we realize we were never apart. To awaken is to remember ... and sometimes death is the beginning of that remembering. The longing to return. Have you ever looked into the eyes of a stranger and felt you knew them? Or walked into a place for the first time and felt at home? Many who believe in reincarnation say these are not fantasies. They are echoes, glimpses of the lives before. Children who remember languages they've never been taught. People who carry unexplained fears, talents, wounds, all traced to a story long forgotten. Some scoff at such claims, others whisper them carefully, afraid to sound foolish. But whether literal or symbolic, the longing remains. To understand where we came from, to make peace with what came before, to return to something we've lost and don't quite remember. The metaphysics of memory. If reincarnation is real, then memory becomes something far deeper than neurons firing in a brain. It becomes soul memory, a resonance that travels not through time but through being. And perhaps this is why, in stillness, in meditation, in dreams, we sometimes feel the pull of something ancient within us. A grief we cannot name, a wisdom we did not earn, a love we never learned but somehow always knew. Maybe that's the echo of our other lives. Or maybe it's simply the reminder that this one is part of a greater arc, and not the end. This life, this moment, whether or not you believe in reincarnation, the question it poses remains powerful. What if your soul is older than you think? What if the person in front of you has suffered and rejoiced in lifetimes you'll never know? What if every moment is shaped not only by what came before, but by what may come after? How would you live if you believed that this was not your only chance? How would you treat others if you knew you'd meet them again in different faces, different roles? And what would it mean to wake up in your next life remembering this one? Would you smile? Would you cry? Would you wish you had lived more gently? The wheel turns, the journey unfolds. The soul moves forward, not blindly, but with a longing to return not to the past, but to the truth that has always waited quietly within. What if death is not an end, but a turning of the wheel? Across cultures and centuries, the idea of reincarnation, that the soul returns again and again in different forms, has endured like a quiet rhythm behind the visible world. In India, it is called samsara, the endless cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. And it is not viewed as a gift, but a burden, a consequence of attachment. A reflection of karma, the moral weight of our actions rippling across lifetimes. The soul, in this vision, is not judged once, but shaped continually. Every life is both a result and a new beginning. You are not punished or rewarded, but returned, until wisdom is finally won and liberation, moksha, is attained. In Tibetan Buddhism, this journey takes on even more mystery. The Bardo Thidal, known in the West as the Tibetan Book of the Dead, describes the soul's passage after death through visions, fears, temptations, shaped not by external gods but by the mind's own projections. What we see in the afterlife, it teaches, is what we are. But reincarnation is not limited to the East. The ancient Greeks, too, had their version. The philosopher Pythagoras spoke of souls transmigrating between bodies, and Plato wrote of a cosmic judgment where souls forget their past lives before entering new ones. And today, in modern times, researchers like Ian Stevenson have studied thousands of cases of young children claiming to remember previous lives, some with astonishing detail. These stories remain controversial, yes, but strangely consistent across cultures, religions, and eras. Could it be that we are older than we think? Could memory stretch beyond birth, carried not in the brain, but in the soul? Reincarnation suggests that we are not singular but layered. That who you are today is only one stanza in a longer poem. A verse still unfolding, a soul still learning. And that perhaps when you die, you will awaken again in a different cradle, under a different sky, with no memory of this life. But shaped by it nonetheless, the soul forgets. But something within continues, a gesture, a longing. A fear you've carried for lifetimes, a love that defies explanation. A place that feels like home, though you've never been. Perhaps what we call instinct is memory, and what we call death is only transition. In the next chapter, we explore a more radical vision where instead of returning to Earth, the soul ascends beyond time entirely. Let's journey next into the mystical visions of heaven, not as a place above the clouds, but a state of being, beyond becoming. There are moments when death seems near, when the body falters, when the heart stops, when breath slips away, and yet, for reasons science cannot fully explain, consciousness returns. These are the near-death experiences, or NDEs, and while often dismissed by skeptics, they persist across cultures, ages, and belief systems. From patients revived in hospitals to drowning survivors pulled back from the edge, their accounts share uncanny patterns. And they hint at something astonishing, that death may not be a wall but a veil. Crossing the threshold, for those who have stood at the brink and returned, the experience is rarely described as chaotic. Instead, they speak of startling calm. There is often a sensation of detachment, as if one has floated above the body, watching medical teams work furiously below. There is light, not just bright but encompassing, not blinding but warm. Some report a tunnel. Others speak of instantaneous arrival in a vast field, or a glowing room, or an open expanse of peace. Common threads include a review of life, not judgmental but revelatory. A deep sense of interconnectedness, the feeling of being asked, not commanded, whether they wish to return. And perhaps most striking of all, the loss of fear. Scientific attempts to explain, science has not ignored these reports. Neuroscience suggests that NDEs may be hallucinations caused by a dying brain, a final flood of DMT. A lack of oxygen, or the brain's attempt to create a cohesive narrative while shutting down. And yet, challenges remain. Some patients report accurate details from resuscitation efforts while flatlined. Others describe events occurring far from the room they were revived in. No theory fully explains why blind people sometimes report seeing during NDEs, or why the emotions described, overwhelming love, peace, timelessness, feel more real than waking life. What NDEs might teach us, whether literal glimpses of another world or metaphors constructed by a mind in crisis, near-death experiences touch something primal in us. They suggest that death is not necessarily painful, that consciousness may not be limited to the body, that the end, if it comes, might arrive with beauty, not terror. Even those who doubt the metaphysical implications often find their worldview shifted by hearing or having an NDE. Values change, priorities shift, the fear of death, long a quiet hum beneath our days, is quieted. Not because we know what lies beyond, but because we have felt, even briefly, that something gentle may catch us when we fall. In the next chapter, we move from these glimpses at the edge to the traditions that claim to know what lies beyond the veil, from Egyptian Book of the Dead to Tibetan Bardo. What happens after we pass through? Let us walk forward. In the quiet beyond death, when all that was once solid has dissolved, what remains? According to many metaphysical traditions, what survives is not your name, your job, or your earthly roles, but something more subtle, a pattern, an essence. A memory, not of events, but of being. This is the memory of the soul. In Hinduism, this idea takes form in karma and samskara, the impressions left by every thought, action, and intention. Like ripples in a pond, these impressions shape the next wave of becoming. The soul carries these traces not as punishment or reward, but as momentum, a continuity of desire and ignorance, learning and release. In Plato's dialogues, we hear echoes of this too. He described the soul as remembering not just experiences, but truths. The forms, the eternal patterns that we glimpsed before incarnation and now must recall. To live, in this sense, is to recollect what the soul already knows. And today, even in the most unexpected places, from children with inexplicable memories to near-death experiencers who return with stunning clarity, the idea persists that something remembers, not a brain, not a story, but a consciousness beneath stories. What if the soul doesn't just move forward, but remembers its shape, its longing, its wounds? What if healing in the afterlife is not about escape, but about remembering yourself fully without distortion? This is the task of the soul between worlds. To see clearly, to recall truth, to become again, but differently. In the next chapter, we'll explore what many traditions call the judgment, not a courtroom drama, but an intimate encounter with the truth of yourself. Not punishment, not reward, just seeing. There comes a moment in many afterlife accounts, whether drawn from sacred scriptures or whispered in near-death recollections, when the soul stops running. Not forward, not backward, just still. And in that stillness, something emerges. Not a voice, not a god, not a gate of gold or fire, but a mirror. The mirror no one escapes, you will see yourself. But not as others saw you, not as the world rewarded or condemned you, not as you crafted your identity through habits, achievements, beliefs. This is not the mirror of ego. This is the mirror of essence. It shows not just what you did, but why you did it. It reflects the subtle motives behind the mask, the tiny cruelties beneath the smiles. The seeds of love you planted that you never even knew grew. It is not a mirror of punishment, it is a mirror of pure seeing. And that seeing changes everything. The life review, more than memory. Many who have returned from near-death experiences speak of a phenomenon often called the life review. It's not like watching a video replay. It's more intimate than memory. It's as if you become every moment. You are both the doer and the one affected. You yell at your brother and feel as if inside him the sharp sting of humiliation. You smile at a passing stranger and feel, inside them, the flicker of light it ignites. You live your life again, but this time in everyone else's skin. It is not a court trial. It is not a list of sins or a tally of virtues. It is a kind of empathic awakening, as if the soul says to itself, "Here is what you became. Now, do you understand? What is judgment, really? Religions speak of Judgment Day, but perhaps that phrase has been misunderstood. Judgment is not necessarily condemnation, not an external decree, but an internal revelation. Judgment means seeing truly. You are not sentenced, you are shown. And in that showing comes sorrow, yes, but also compassion for yourself, for others, for all the missed chances to love. In some mystical traditions, this moment is not terrifying, it is liberating, because what was unconscious is finally made conscious, and what was fractured begins to integrate. This is not eternal damnation, this is healing clarity. The inner courtroom, in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, this is described in symbolic form. You encounter deities of light and wrath, gods and demons. But the text warns these are not external beings. They are your mind, your hopes, your guilt, your attachments, your fears. You are judged by your own awareness. You stand before no divine gavel, but your own unfiltered truth. And the great secret, the judge does not hate you. The judge does not mock you. The judge is just you. What happens after the mirror? You might ask, if this mirror shows us everything, what happens next? The answer depends. Some souls awaken immediately. They let go. They understand. They move on. Others cannot bear the reflection. They cling to old identities, attachments, unfinished business. Some traditions call this purgatory, others karma, others the astral plane. But underneath the labels is a deeper idea. The soul continues its journey until it is ready to see with love, until it is no longer afraid of what it is, until it can meet its shadow without shame, until it can gaze into the mirror and whisper, "Yes, I remember now." The mercy hidden in judgment. So, what if? What if judgment is not the end of the road, but the soul's turning point? What if it's the point where we finally stop blaming the world and start taking responsibility for our light? What if it's the beginning of deep mercy? For ourselves, for the people we hurt. For the people who hurt us, because the truth is this. Every soul, no matter how broken, is still capable of seeing clearly, and in that seeing, choosing again. In the final chapter, we ask the ultimate question. If death is not the end, and judgment is not condemnation, then what is the soul truly moving toward? What is the purpose of this long, strange journey? Let's walk the final stretch together. Somewhere beyond all the maps, beyond every myth and metaphor we've explored, lies a silence so deep it cannot be spoken, a mystery so vast it cannot be imagined. This is the final frontier in our journey through the afterlife, not a place, not a judgment, not a reunion or a reincarnation, but a return. Not return as a circle, where we begin again, but return as a dissolving, where what we thought we were begins to fade, and what we truly are begins to shine. In the teachings of mystical traditions across cultures, there is a recurring whisper that at the end of all becoming, we return not to another self, not to a heaven of our imagining, but to the source itself. What is this source? God, the Tao, the One, the field of pure consciousness. All words collapse here, like the ancient mystics of India who spoke of Brahman, the unchanging reality behind all forms. Or the Apophatic Christians who described God as darkness beyond light. Or the Zen masters who say, the way that can be named is not the eternal way. We find again and again that the destination of the soul is not another version of the world, but the vanishing of separation. Imagine the drop of water returning to the ocean. It doesn't disappear in the sense of loss. It disappears into fullness. All boundaries dissolve. All fears lose their shape. All identities gently fall away. And what remains is not an individual, but being itself. Not a story, but stillness. Not even peace, because there is no opposite. This is not a moment of forgetting, but of remembering. That we never left the source, that we were never apart from the whole. That the soul is not something we own, but something we are, always flowing, always held, always returning. Even in this life, there are moments that feel like echoes of that return. A moment of stillness in the forest where time stops. A deep breath at dawn when you feel infinite and fragile at once. A dream where you are nothing, and it feels like home. These are hints, fragments, invitations. And so death, in this final chapter, is not the breaking of the story, it is the dissolving of illusion. The uncoiling of form, the soft arrival, into the place we never truly left. The source is not far. It is not later. It is here, now, and always.